I think adversity is the weapon that people need. When you lack adversity, you lack the opportunity for developing different and better instincts, different behaviors. When you lack adversity, all you have is complacency.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership, plus applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. Hey, I'm your host today, Brett Swartz, and each and every episode we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of faith, success, and impact. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's actually now a good friend of mine, and his mission is to serve people at the highest level possible. He's been blessed with various business opportunities, which have allowed him to become financially free and in turn invest in others and help them reach their personal goals and potential. After investing in his local real estate market for 12 plus years, he co-founded Cashflow Tribe, the fastest growing real estate investing community in Canada, and they live by a few core values, including community, results, impact, and transparency, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Ben Humble. Ben, how we doing, brother?
Hey, my man, good to be here.
Excited to have you, and for our listeners, and honored to have you too, brother. For our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give them just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up, I'm from Romania. I'm an immigrant. We escaped the communist country in 1989. Escaped on foot, actually became refugees, and I'm the oldest of 9 kids. So we came to Canada as immigrants in 1991, and English is my third language. And so it's been a really cool growth. So our whole family's had an immigrant mindset from the jump. So nothing is free. Everything you must work for, and utilize a group of values and thoughts and perspectives along the way. So I like to think of myself as a relatively contrarian thinker. I think most people, in relation to most people, the way they do life, most people follow what they've learned. From a 9-to-5 job perspective, from how you deal with money, from how you deal with relationships. And I believe wisdom is underrated in today's economy, and I believe that perspective is underrated. And I think a lot of folks just follow the status quo, and as a result, they get the status, whoa, nothing exciting. So I'm a believer in helping people push to the next level, and I'm a believer of just straight fundamental truth. There are, in a world like today, fundamental truths and there's relative truths. And I think that the more we can agree on fundamental truths, the more we can move the agenda forward. The more that we're debating about what's a fact and what's fiction, the less productive we're going to be. So glad to be here. Let's chop some wood.
Absolutely. Absolutely love it. And this is, Ben and I've got a chance to get to know each other, a part of a mastermind for about a year together. And it's been an honor. He led a pod that I was a part of, and a part of the Wellspring. And so, and this is kind of what sparked this conversation, was the art of high stakes conversations is really what sparked it, because we were both in some high stakes or even just crucial conversations. If you read that book, Crucial Conversations, if you read the book or listened to Chris Voss, The Art of Negotiation, and his book, Never Split the Difference, we were just talking about it, and I just felt like Ben had a ton of wisdom here, and we're going to kind of dive down a little bit today on that. And so, Ben, what would you say is the number one secret to, really the art of high stakes conversations?
There's a lot of maturity around these conversations. I think a lot of people have high-stakes conversations without having the maturity and perspective, which is what makes them high stakes. So I think that if I'm going to have to pick a number one thing in a high-stakes relationship or conversation, my focus is actually to lower the stakes. The person who's the most desperate, has the most to lose, is the most excited, is the most paranoid, that person will lose. It's a self-fulfilling behavior. Lower the stakes. So that means that before you ever get to a high-stakes conversation, it's having more critical thinking, more conversations, more awareness about where those things can end up before you get there. So I think the best way for me is lower the stakes and prevent them before they ever even happen. If you get to a point where you're in a really critical, high-stakes conversation, then I think it's time to step back, lower your emotional response, and develop clarity. Clarity. Look at the future-based outcomes and say, what's really going to happen here? And have a mature lens. Like, I don't think anybody's good at hard conversations until they've had a lot of hard conversations. It's not innate to us. We're trying to avoid conflict. Some personality types, like mine, don't mind conflict. I like resolution. I like answers, which means I have to go through conflict. So I think that there's ways to navigate them, but I don't know if there's a best tip. Yeah, don't have them. You create a life and a business for yourself where you've already looked at the risks and understood the risks well before you engaged. And as a result, you can hedge against some of those high stakes things, right? And not have to put yourself in a position of volatility.
Yeah. And speaking of that, by the way, love that. Yeah. So it sounds like focus to lower the stakes, right? Lower the emotional response. I love that. I think that's wisdom right there. Like the Bible says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, right? Develop clarity, have a mature lens of where you're actually wanting this to go, right? And really ask yourself more questions, right? More preparation. Love all of that, more, which ultimately leads to more awareness. So that's number one. What would be number two that comes to mind, right? What number two is the art of high stakes conversations, assuming that you've lowered the stakes, right? And now you're entering it or the next step. What comes to mind?
I really like this idea or framework of whose world are you living in? Oftentimes when things are stressful, it's because you have placed yourself in somebody else's reality. So in a high-stakes conversation, you've got two competing parties with two different outcomes, or even maybe the same outcome, but two different processes of getting there. And you have to say whose reality is winning today, whose truth is winning today. And this is when you present your case. Hey, this is what happened, and this is where we want to go. And you start to look at who really is owning this story, this narrative. And I think it's important that you have to retain your story, your narrative. I think that there's a lot of times when we make mistakes or we make decisions, which later on are perceived to be mistakes, no different than an investment. I made a choice to buy crypto and then it went down. I made a mistake. No, you made a decision. But what's the story? I think in the story is where we become a victim. And in the story, I think you lose momentum and perspective. So it's as simple as this answer. Yes, we're going to negotiate. And yes, we're going to have conversation. And yes, we're going to try to find some medium ground. But at the end of the day, my story is my story. I've learned over time that people are seasonal. All people are seasonal. There's a birth and then there's a death, right? And if an employee, a partner, somebody in your business organization wants to leave or cause havoc, realize that might just be the end of that chapter and be wise enough to go, I'm still writing my book. So I think that's what's important. You got to still write this book. You can't give up writing and give somebody else the authorship of your story because that's when you lose. That's when you become a victim. So when you're going through a difficult chapter in your book, which we all do, understand that it's a difficult chapter. I think a powerful thing to do is to take perspective of that and take hold of that. Like, I'm going through such a difficult season, but it's because of this season that I'm going to have an incredible story to tell later. If you can get that level of attitude, it won't necessarily ease the decision, but it'll give you more perspective over the long-term outcomes. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? It doesn't really matter because in 10 years from now, we'll be beyond this. This too shall pass.
Wisdom right there. Wisdom, and I couldn't agree with you more. I want to bring a little bit into this here with Tim Grover, and he wrote the book Relentless, and he was the coach for Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, right? And he talked about failure and the relationship to failure. I think this even applies to the relationship to conflict, or like he said, making decisions, and the decision happened and didn't turn out the way you want it to do. And he talked about when you get knocked down, what do you do, right? What do I do when I get knocked down? What's my relationship to failure? And he said a couple things that really stuck out to me. Number one, that he told Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, like, stay down a little bit. Let it sting, right? I think we're in the age of, either I want to dismiss it, I want to excuse it, I want to distract it, right? And not staying in that pain a little bit to really let it like sink in, like, wow, what actually happened here? Like, and let it sting. And in fact, he told a story about Kobe Bryant in his prime. Okay, now he's playing Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan is kind of the end of his career. He's in the twilight. He's the Washington Wizards at this point, and Kobe's all excited, to play Michael. He honors Michael. He looked up to Michael. He wanted to be Michael, right, or better than Michael, and so he's wearing the Michael Jordan shoes, right? So he comes in and he's playing, and Michael actually does basically dominates him for that game. Michael has an amazing game. The Wizards beat the Lakers, and after the game, Kobe is walking up to Michael to shake his hand, and Michael says this to Kobe: "Hey, Kobe, you can wear the shoes, but you'll never fill them." They said at Kobe for 2 weeks. It stung so hard, so it hurt him so much. For 2 weeks, he didn't say a word to anybody. He didn't say a word to his teammates, his family. He just let it sting and sit in that pain, right? And then he asked himself a couple questions, and this is where Tim comes in and he talks about how when Michael had failures, right? He a couple questions. Number one, how am I responsible? How am I responsible? Number two, what were the actions I took that created this? What were the actions that I took that created this, right? And fast forward on the story, a couple weeks later, after Kobe's, letting this emotion and letting this challenge drive him forward, he's really intense at practice, all of the things. They play the Lakers a couple weeks later. Kobe comes back and he dominates Michael, okay? And at the end, they shake hands, and basically it was like the passing of the mantle from Jordan to Kobe. And I love the story because it, instead of just dismissing the sting, dismissing the the pain, right? It was like, what can I look inward to move forward? And do you resonate with that, Ben? Or what are your thoughts on that when it comes to conflict and working through these challenging things?
Well, I mean, you make an interesting point, Brett, about pain. My belief is there's two kinds of pain. There's the purposeful pain and the pointless pain. And if purposeful pain will get you somewhere, it'll help you develop resiliency and different thinking. Pointless pain is just from a lack of perspective and a lack of maturity. Like, we're going through pain over and over again. I remember growing my real estate company and came to a season where we were making money, but I was unhappy with all of the operational stuff. And I got a mentor who basically sat me down and said, "You have to burn the ships." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You built something that when you started were passionate about, but you allowed so many people to make decisions about the business. You failed to really own the culture of the business, and now other people own your culture. And because they own your culture, they own your company." And he said, what you need to do is actually burn it down. You need to burn down the company and rebuild it with the proper culture in mind. And I didn't know that. Like, when we launch a business as new entrepreneurs, we're most of us hustlers. We're just trying to get it going. We're not thinking about culture and leadership. That's not part of the conversation, not till you hit a couple $1 million at least. So we're making millions of dollars, but we have terrible culture. So I had to burn it down. So I spent a week going to my office and I talked to nobody for a week. So I understand that pain. It's a realization. It's a realization that for you to get to the next level of your growth, your psychological growth, your financial growth, spiritual growth, you will have seasons of wilderness. You will have seasons of solitude, and you have to learn how to navigate your voice in that season and come up to the hard realizations. Like, what got you here will not get you there. A lot of that psychologically is so true. The coping mechanisms you've used to be a survival instinct adult is not the same one that gets you to be a thriving adult. It's not the same thing. You've got to find different ways, different behaviors. So I think, man, we need to go through I think adversity is the weapon that people need. When you lack adversity, you lack the opportunity for developing different and better instincts, different behaviors. When you lack adversity, all you have is complacency. So I see so many adult-bodied people with a really premature development in the way they think about just about every topic. They follow all the political stuff. They trade their life for their stupid iPhone. They don't live in purpose. They run around all day saying they want things, but their body doesn't do those things. And to me, the integrity is what you think, like what you believe you think and what you think you do. That's integrity. If you don't do what you think and what you say, then you're living out of integrity and you will be miserable. So I like that Kobe went through that. Personally, I don't follow basketball, so I don't know the story on a personal level. But anytime somebody tells me about an adversity, I love it. It gave you a chance to build something that most people will never build. And that's grit.
That's amazing. I want to keep going on this because you just dropped a ton of wisdom there. You guys should rewind that and listen to that again. I think that's another one of Ben's next books. And so Tim Grover goes on to say, how am I responsible? What were the actions I took to create this? And then he also said this, what is the lesson in the failure, right? And then he went on to say this, how will I adjust my approach so this never happens again? How will I adjust my approach so this never happens again? So I kind of want to bring this back to the topic, right? Which we're talking about, which is the art of, like challenging conversations, right? The art of difficult conversations. Looking back at either the business partnerships or the it could be employees, it could be clients, it could be customers, it could be a number of things, right? Looking back, Ben, what are the things you're like, okay, I'm going to adjust my approach so this never happens again. What are some of those things that you practice to make sure that, these high stake conversations are happening? Like you're not making that mistake ever again.
Ooh, that's a great question, man. I think it's important to become emotionally available, but not emotionally invested. I think one of the greatest hedges in a business relationship, not your marriage, not your kids, but in a business relationship is be available and understand that there's humanity and that there's enterprise and they have to coexist somehow, and be okay with that concept, but don't invest your emotional capacity into somebody else's ability to perform. Do not invest. Like when we look at somebody, we put so much trust in people, and I develop principles that I stand firm on all the time. So one of my principles is trust but verify. So I believe that you think it's a great idea, and I believe that you think these are the factual numbers, but until I can verify, I trust you that you believe it, but I can't trust the data because I haven't seen the data. So being a mature business owner, I think you have an optimistic outlook, but you have a very pragmatic approach. Like numbers are numbers. Another one of my fundamental things is data, not drama, which leads me to my next one. Show me, don't tell me. Like all of these are really just foundations to the way that I do everything. So even on a Zoom call with the team, for example, hey, Ben, this is what happened. Show me. You don't need to tell me. I've been in business enough time where I can dissect the numbers and make a calculation much faster than you can give me a story on it. So we get into this really prophetic storytelling, future-based pro forma narratives, right? Everybody's selling everybody on all the stuff, but the numbers don't lie. And the numbers will help you make better quality decisions. So I think every single business owner hearing my voice needs to develop a core set of principles that you stand on and you don't deviate from. They're designed to protect you. They're designed to insulate you from unnecessary risk, right? From pointless pain. So love people, understand people, and keep an arm's length emotional relationship with them. That's it. And somebody's going to hear this and they're going to say, well, but I got to believe in my team and I got to get them excited and I have to nurture them and I have to da-da-da-da-da. And I agree with you. There is an element of leadership that has to do that, but you cannot force people to do things they don't have the desire to do. That's it. There's only 3 elements in my books. The desire to do, there's the capacity to understand, and then there's the skill, which is the actual ability. Those are 3 qualifiers. Do you have enough desire, yes or no? Do you have the capacity? You just don't get it. You don't understand the goals, the targets, and what's possible. And then do you lack the skills? The easiest one to fix is the skills. The hardest one to build is the desire. So I think that's the game. It's like you got to be able to step away emotionally from the business and it still grows. And if it doesn't, then you have been what I've heard referenced as the emotional lid. You are the highest emotional lid and belief lid in your organization. Nobody can believe more than you can believe if you're the owner of the company. That's crazy to me. Think about that, right, Brett? So if you lack belief, nobody can supersede your authority in that belief cycle. It's crazy. It's crazy. So you have to show up with a level of maturity before you start. Otherwise, you're going to go through pain, and then you're going to gain knowledge from the pain, and your second and third approach will be different. Yeah.
We're speaking with the Ben Humble. By the way, we can look him up with humble.ceo. It's humble.ceo. He is, I believe, an entrepreneurial real estate contrarian thinker. Like everything he said in the beginning. And also just a ton of wisdom, biblical wisdom that he's sharing with us right now. I love a couple things I want to point out. So trust but verify. Got it. Yep. I love that. I love the way you put it, though. I trust you that you believe it, but I trust the data, right? So data, not drama. I think that's so good, right? That's so good. Show me, not tell me. Be emotionally available, but not emotionally invested. Meaning, I think, and if I'm also hearing you, Ben, you're saying like, if you're emotionally depending upon somebody else for the value of or the vision or like where you're taking something, like you're putting so much into that person, right? Rather than having your faith, and your trust in the Lord. And tell me if you're talking about how we bring the Lord into this. And then two, like back to like how am I responsible, right? How can I do the things to make sure that I'm responsible? I kind of like the extreme ownership type of mindset, right? So talk about how you bring the Lord into this and how that connects the dots for you.
The only real trust, because I'm a born again believer, right? The only real trust is between you and your Creator. Okay? He's the only one proven. God is proven. I'm here. I'm evidence of his love. I'm evidence of his creation. But we live in a sinful world where people are flesh. And I've learned in my life, you fight the flesh and you feed the spirit. And that helps you mature emotionally and spiritually. But everybody's flesh, man. We all struggle with the same stuff in just different degrees and in different seasonalities. So putting your trust in another human is a flawed system. People don't want to hear this. Oh, but I trust my employees. You shouldn't. You should verify. You should exhibit love, and you should empower, and you should give opportunity. But this is what I mean. The word investment to me is a very obscure word because we don't really evaluate this. An investment to me is something that you can afford to put a resource into and not expect to get it back. So if it's a financial investment, I put my money in and I'm willing to leave it for the long term because an investment grows with time. Speculation doesn't. So an investment is something I put something into and I leave it alone. The second thing is an investment is something I can afford to lose. If I put money into something, I'm prepared to, if it's crypto, for example, I'm prepared to sit on it for 20 years. If not, then you shouldn't make that investment. So I think most of us, when I say the word investment, is that you are expecting the capacity and the value to grow over time, and that's what you're going to get a maturing return on your investment or a yield. So investing your emotions is saying that if I put my emotions in 20 years from now, it's going to come back to me tenfold. It won't, because people are flawed and broken and seasonal. That's it. End of story. So you have to be available, understand, but your business is dead or alive today. Businesses don't stagnate well. They grow or they die. That's the end of the story. They're either growing and you're making momentum and you're bringing on the right talent and you're advancing, or they're not. So I think as a biblical principle, it's planting seeds, and only God can bring the rain and the wind and the harvest. That's it. And sometimes you plant seeds, and guess what? You're saying, God, bring me the rain, and he doesn't bring you the rain on that seed. And that's very frustrating. You're putting a lot of work into something that you want to mature, and when it's not growing, you're like, man, I'm not seeing the blessing or the harvest, but yet something else in your life starts to work well. And sometimes the harvest happens in a different area. So my word I prefer is I don't think humans have discipline. Humans either have obedience or not. I like obedience because obedience says, regardless of how I feel, I'm doing it or I'm not. If I'm doing it, that's obedience. If I'm not doing it, it's disobedience, right? Delayed obedience equals disobedience. So how do I bring this back? Like, Bible gives you very clear instruction on everything. But I think we feel that we have to redevelop the wheel here, and we have to recreate the wheel when humanity is humanity. Flesh is flesh. People's behavior is people's behavior. Nothing changes. The world around you gives you different context. We have the same problems we've always had. Greed, lust, fear, sin. excitement. It's the same stuff. So I think lean on, again, my pastor says you got the word in the world, and the word doesn't change. Hasn't changed, won't change. The world keeps changing their opinion on what is acceptable. So you don't need the new revolutionary book on negotiating in hard conversations. You need to rely on wisdom, which is listen, make sure people feel heard, make sure you understand the real consequence of both sides of the decision. And then here's what you can't do. You can't outsource your agency. You got to make the decision. You can have all the advisors in the world, but the responsibility of the decision rests with the leader. And that's the reality. So I don't think you can outsource culture, and I don't think you can outsource decisions, even if you get help in trying to decipher what to do about them.
Love it all. So let's get practical, right? So we talked about, you and I off podcast on our podcast, on our pod meetings with Wellspring. We talked about, mirroring and labeling, right? And this is something that I've learned through difficult business relationships that I've been involved in especially the last like 24 months. It's been really intense, right? 2 in particular that kind of like were pretty heavy, right? And it, the Bible says be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so it's like, how do you do that? Like you just do that, right? Well, I felt like in Chris Voss's tactical way of doing this is by asking questions, right? Seeking to understand, but doing it in a way where it doesn't cause a agreement or disagreement, right? It's a mirror and it's a label of something that someone just said, and it's a label of an emotion and or the essence of what they said, right? And so Ben, what are your thoughts on that? Someone comes at you, with an emotional thing that is high stakes, and the fact pattern or it may be, it's differing fact patterns, right? And the intensity is almost like, accept my fact pattern, right? What I've learned is to label that emotion and to say, hey, I believe, like you're basically, it sounds like, it feels like, it seems like that is your truth. That is the way you see it and the emotion behind it. But it's not having to feeling like you're obligated to react or obligated to like defend or to respond or to throw a punch back, right? But what are your thoughts on that? I call it like a jujitsu versus like someone throws a fact, an absolute fact kind of thing, and you're like, instead of throwing it back, walk me through what your thoughts on that strategy are.
Again, we're all flesh, so we all have a tendency to react. And I think it requires a lot of practice to develop this next thing I'm about to talk about. But we live with these emotional and relationship contracts. Okay, we walk around and we have these contracts we've signed that tells us how to do things. And I think eventually the contracts no longer look like rights, they look like obligations. So it's like we feel like if somebody's angry, we have to respond. Like we have a social agreement that I have to, well, number one, I have to listen to what you have to say, which frankly I don't. Number two, that I have to agree. One of the most powerful reframes that I practice for years now, and I'm trying to get better, is this concept of insight versus agreement. We're so quick to agree or disagree, it makes somebody wrong. What if you just listened for the purpose of insight, not agreement? And not as a trick, but as a reality check of like their belief is just not your belief. So don't agree and don't disagree. Just be available to listen. It's a pretty simple approach. It's very frustrating from your flesh standpoint because you want to react and be right or wrong because your ego needs that. But if you just said, listen, I want to just understand what's going on, and I'm going to remove the social agreements. I don't have to agree. I don't have to rebuttal. I don't have to give you an explanation. I think we feel that we have somehow created these obligations. This happens online. The moment you decide to become an influencer, you've got the amendments, right? And one of them is freedom of speech. So guess what? It's in the Constitution that people will disagree with you. That's the way this works. If you don't like it, move to another country. But it's in the Constitution that everybody will disagree. So if you're online and you're getting all this hate and drama and whatever, you feel the need to defend yourself. Why? No one's attacking you. They're exhibiting an opinion. It may not be your opinion. The best thing to do is just let it be. In fact, the best thing to do is just go make another piece of content and not get into the hype with some person. Instead of hating people, just allow them to be. And assess everything as a legitimate threat or as a perceived threat. And I think that's the problem, is emotionally, I'm going to say this nicely. I'm from a communist country, right, Brett? You know this. And there's real threats, persecution, life. I think when we live in a first world economy with a lack of real danger, we create artificial emotional danger. So when we don't have real problems, we basically build mental ones. Because humans have this knack. We need adversity. So it's like, I have food, I have shelter, I have housing. I better create a mental disability. Now, someone's going to hate me saying that because you're like, that's ridiculous. People, like, why is there so much depression in a first world economy? There's less depression in countries where people don't have food because they're so busy trying to go get food, they ain't got time to create depressions. And that may seem like a very, again, blank, broad-brushed approach. What does that mean? That means to stop engaging. Like, it's really not that difficult. You just have to make a decision. So if you're angry, whether it's online or in person, Chris Voss, I like his book. Be calm. See, the problem with me trying to mimic you is if you're irrational and intense, and then I develop an irrational, intense response, like, you can always move forward from a low energy to a high energy, but it's almost impossible once you've been crazy and made all the noise to take it back. So there's more regret, there is more risk when you are loud and brash and reactive. There's less risk when you're not. And this is everything, in my opinion, from marriage to business deals. Be calm. If you got to bite your tongue, go for whatever mechanism between you receiving the information and you responding, you have to create some type of conduit there that gets you to a reasonable response. Some people take a walk. Some people go hit the gym. Some people are better at dealing with those situations than others. It doesn't serve you to flare up your ego. In the long run, you will lose more than you have gained.
So, Ben, so good again. I wonder if you can get practical, right?
Yep.
And be a little vulnerable, right? And looking back, you say, hey, Brett, like, had I had a chance to do it over again with a few of the business relationships you had in the past, like, what is the one or two things that you would have, like, definitely made sure to do, right? Either to do or not to do. Like, what comes to mind that could, like, really help someone today who's stuck in between, you know, that either that tough relationship or even considering going into a business partnership and is thinking like, oh, all, you know, everything, the roses smell good, you know, we're aligned. Like what would be what's some of the sage wisdom that Ben would give to someone who's listening right now for that?
If you're going to engage in a business partnership, the new rule that I've built for myself is don't build partnerships out of convenience. Oftentimes, let's say in real estate, joint venture partnerships, you find somebody willing to divide the workload and you go, well, since you're willing to divide the load, we'll just become partners. You do this and I'll do that. And it's a business of convenience. It really is. There's no strategic element. So tactical partnerships suck because there's no real inherent value exchange. There is your willingness to work and my willingness to work. And when one person feels inevitably that the other one is working harder or not as hard, they'll develop entitlements, develop these feelings. So I think if you're going to engage in a partnership, you have to ask in a very practical way, what are you really bringing to the table that I cannot bring? Not, what are you willing to do and let's split up the work and you do this and all we both. If you share the same skill, the same everything, you don't need two of you. You need to find a better way. You need to find a smarter way of operating instead of dividing the work and dividing the outcome. So that's my answer. Instead of working harder with more people, work smarter with less. Number one. Number two, if you're going to get into a partner, be super strategic. If you're the right brain, creative, quick start personality type, and you're about getting it done, well, then you should be really aware that you're going to require very logical, steady-paced, calculated, detail-oriented other counterparty because business requires both art and science. They do. So you need to be willing to have people that are different than you. And what I've learned along the way is this very valuable lesson. Do not try to force people to become you. You don't need a mini-me. You don't need a number two that's just like you. You need somebody with a different skill. And it's very frustrating for strong-headed entrepreneurs to have people that are different than them. But you require that level of compliance and that level of accountability and that level of precision. Even though they work slower than you, they don't have all the big ideas, you require that personality in your business. So I think the smart business owner, Brett, takes the time to look at an org chart and says, not what roles do I need to fill, but what different types of personalities and behaviors do I need? Because that's the behavioral science. If you can fit the right personalities in the right seat, you can grow in your skills. But if you get the wrong personalities, it doesn't matter how accredited and qualified they are with the skill, they're going to just piss everybody off all the time, and they're never going to get an outcome. So I think you start with that level of insight and leadership. So I think that's a very practical. You tell me if you feel that is, but don't get into convenience partnerships. Don't just divide the workload.
I think that nailed it on the head, right? Don't build a partnership out of convenience. Right? That's why we think tactical. We think like you just split the workload. It will split the outcome. Asking the tough questions. What are you really bringing to the table? What am I really bringing to the table? Right? And don't make it out of convenience. Right? Make it out of true like behavioral personalities, like that's going to complement and that you don't have. They have that side of the brain. They have that side of the skill set. And it's not similar. It's actually going to be tough because that's why they complement one another, right? Because otherwise they just be like you. So yeah, again, thinking contrarian. Anything else that you would say?
Yeah, let me throw this piece out here. This one's huge that I've learned along the way, and this is especially true with partners. Somebody else's financial constraints in a partnership become your financial constraints. Okay, someone else's inability to execute effectively becomes your inability. You are arbitraging somebody else's capacity. So like, here's an example, okay? You have somebody who's broke, and you get into business with them, and you're the one with financial stability, and they're not. Do you know at some point their financial problems do become your financial problems? Because their financial problems are going to stress on their life, and that is going to encumber upon you. At some point, they need more money, more time off. They need to deal with their financial situation, and you're the one with resource, and they will come to you to take resources. So I've learned, and this is a hard lesson, okay? I know a lot of great people that, that I would love to be in business with. I've met a lot of great people over the years, but when looking at the way they manage money, not just how much they have, but their financial habits, I can't fathom being in a business relationship, even though I really like them. Because the way you waste is the way you're going to waste my resources. That's what it is. And your pressure becomes my pressure. And then the inability. I think it's important that you evaluate people before you get into business and say, is this person a talker or a legitimate doer? My practical approach to this is, do one project together, something that's low risk, something that's still stimulating to both people. But do one project together and look at this person's ability to execute. You'll learn everything you need once people are under stress, not before. So do a low-risk project. I think we're especially salespeople, right? We're so quick to bring people on board because of momentum, and there's a lot of good reasons to work quickly. But when we don't thoroughly evaluate somebody else's ability to get it done, so what do? You use different things. I have a tool. So we use a tool called the predictive index. You can use a tool like this. It's a behavioral tool that somebody can take a test. In about 5 minutes, I can have a pretty good idea of what their predisposition is, their behavioral attributes are, what they will do under times of stress. It helps me make a better decision about what kind of stress is not going to be good for them. For example, I'll give you a quick practical tip. People like me talk fast. I like to talk fast and work fast, okay? This is my pace. This is my rhythm. I really like people at my rhythm and pace. But if I hired somebody or partnered with somebody who was like this, Brett, and you meet people like this, they're not broken. They're different. If I force that person to work faster, they will be frustrated and likely make mistakes. Likely, the same thing, if I worked with somebody who was super slow and they were in charge of an area and I was super fast, it would be incredibly frustrating for me because it would seem like we're wasting a lot of time. They're looking at it like it's steady, methodical work. So I think behavior is so underrated. Understanding somebody's behavior is a really valuable element in getting business done.
So there's literally so much more but we are out of time on this first part of this episode. I got 60 seconds, but I want to give people a sneak preview, Ben, and then have you come back, because here are just some things I want to plant in someone's ears and thoughts, right? Key lessons and questions learned from basically a broken partnership, right? Alignment of vision and values, clear roles and responsibilities, communication and transparency, financial and legal preparations, right? Flexibility and adaptability. And I want to sit down with you and literally read some of these thoughts and statements and glean your wisdom if we'd be willing to come back in 2 weeks, a month, whenever works for you, and dive into this, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface and people want to learn more from you, Ben. What do you say? Would you come back in a week or 2 or 3?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we're looking at a decade of wisdom trying to do it in a half hour. So yes, of course. And there's a lot of concepts to go deeper on. I think surface level conversations are a good start. They won't fix your problem. There's a lot of things to dive deep. So yeah, I think we need to go deeper on things like emotional literacy and what does that mean for you and your business partnerships. So yes, happy to do it.
Okay, so Ben's going to come back. But Ben, if people want to get in touch with you right now, where can they find you?
Well, you can join me on Instagram, Ben Humble on Instagram. That's probably the best place, or the website, humble.ceo. I actually don't have anything to sell you folks today. Just happy to be on a conversation with Brett, and hopefully it inspires somebody to ask better quality questions.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, come back. This is just part 1. We're going to have part 2. We're going to have Ben back on the show. Take action today. Hopefully you rewind this, take the wisdom down, and just apply this, right? Because we want you to be great stewards with the gifts you've been given to scale from millions to billions, but also to scale for impact, right? Make a difference in your life and someone else's life. The art of having difficult conversations is what we're going to continue to talk about. I think it's so important in this world where there's a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of wisdom, though, that can just be gleaned if we slow down, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So look for the second part coming up real soon. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel. Build It to Billions is what it's called, so you can give more all the way. I'm Brett Swartz. That was Ben Humble, and we'll talk to you guys all and gals real soon. Bye now.
We'll be right back.